Hello and welcome to the Wisepreneurs podcast. My name is Nigel Rawlins and I work with a range of women who are professionals in their field. They're often 50 to 60 years old who want to start their own business. In this podcast, I'll be interviewing a range of guests who will be able to tell you how they've done it themselves, and others who will give you hints and ideas and tips and maybe the confidence you need to go out and start your own business. I want to introduce you to Krisna Hanks, a remarkable 66-year-old fireball of energy, vitality and vigour, and a testament to the power of a life of purpose and passion. Her story stretches from the dance stages of Chicago, New York City, and the Netherlands. With a career spanning over 33 years, she's now channeling the discipline and resilience from her dance career into a unique wellness approach using the foundations of her fitness, yoga, Pilates, and nutrition as a holistic health coach. We'll explore the core tenets of holistic health, the significance of metabolic health, the role of insulin, nutrition for peak performance, and the all-important protein intake. Krisna will also explain why strength training isn't just a good idea, it's a necessity for healthy aging. Welcome, Krisna, to the Wisepreneurs podcast. I'm really pleased that I could get you on. Krisna, could you tell us something about your early days? Because you're a professional dancer, so tell us something about that.
Absolutely. So I had what in the dance world is a pretty long career. I was around 33 years. I started dancing professionally around the age of 15. I was very lucky that this brilliant choreographer moved to my small town in Illinois and started a professional dance company. That was Pamela Bedford. That was my first dance experience. The shortened version of that long career was that took me to Chicago. I danced with a company there called Kasha. I was seeking other adventures in the dance world. Ended up in New York City and finished off my career with a couple decades in the Netherlands, working with a host of different choreographers, Lisa Ross Marcus to the Dutch National Opera and many others in between. And it was a fabulous career.
So what made you move to the Netherlands?
Actually, I'm in Tucson, Arizona, but I lived, close to 2 decades in the Netherlands, in Amsterdam. And I was with someone else at the time, and we had both been looking for more challenges in our work environment. And we both sort of experienced different things. I took some auditions while I was there, and one job sort of led to another. We ended up not being together, but I stayed in Amsterdam and finished off my dance career there. And then actually from my dance career, I went immediately into executive coaching with a company in what was based in Amsterdam, the Benelux area. That was kind of my ease out of my dance career into officially being a coach.
That's fabulous. So, no, that's why I checked the time. I thought Amsterdam at midnight. So Tucson, Arizona. So how long have you been there?
We'll be 2 years in November. And previously than that, we were in the San Francisco Bay Area for about 13 years, a couple years in Pasadena, Los Angeles area, and now here in Tucson. Tucson.
Hot.
Little bit like Australia.
We're in autumn here, so it's got down to 8 degrees centigrade. So I don't know what that is in Fahrenheit. So you had your dance career and that came to an end. So how did you then get into executive coaching? What did you...
Sure. I think maybe it's good to back up just a little bit. I think even though it was a primary job as a professional dancer was dancing, being on stage, working with companies, productions, tours, all the kinds of things. But any professional dancer must, throughout their career, also be doing other things, which, for lack of a better phrase to it, meaning you are probably teaching some form of dance. I taught dance, Iyengar yoga. I choreographed for other people. I was also a personal trainer, and had all the certifications around that. Iyengar yoga, Pilates. So you're constantly building other skills and tools along the way. And that is not just because dance is not one of those professions that pays extremely well, but you know also that it has a finite end, meaning you will not dance forever. And this, you're kind of wanting to build your skills along the way for that whenever that day comes. How I wove into executive coaching was a firm that was based in the Netherlands, was incorporated within their executive coaching a physical component, a vocal component, as well as a just creative communication component. So my skills as having lots of movement experience as well as vocal experience just transferred really nicely into that field. And obviously I got some additional skills along the way, certifications in that, but it was a sort of perfect fit. And it was very interesting because your company is really focused on women. We were a company of women, but doing a lot of courses for primarily for men. So it was a very interesting dichotomy within the corporate structure. And I thoroughly enjoyed it.
That sounds fantastic. So you were doing multiple things. So it means, you had to cope with all that. So physically, how did you cope? How did you look after yourself that you weren't exhausted all the time?
I think something that I grew up with, for lack of a better word, discipline. My dad was a basketball coach. My mom was a stay-at-home mom. And they were extremely different. My dad, obviously being in basketball, was very fitness, exercise oriented. My mom did not like group things. She did not like that kind of thing. She was very creative in terms of amazing seamstress, cook. So I had these sort of two role models in the house. However, our household always revolved on if you wanted to go do something, you needed to do XYZ before you could do that. Oftentimes that would be helping in the house, doing something outside. My dad in his early days was, would go exercise so take us with him as well. That we were ingrained that there were sort of a structure of things to do before you wanted to participate in the thing that you were wanting to do. So I've always had that bit of discipline in there. Obviously with a career in dance, you must be extremely disciplined around your exercise, around your nutrition, getting good sleep, all of these things we talk about in the aging component, right? That you have to do to survive. When you're a professional dancer, if your machine isn't working, you're not working. And that means you're not being able to pay your rent or you're not even able to do the thing you really love. So you learn to appreciate that you need to take care of it. And that, I think, carried me, certainly, and still carries me. It's no secret I'm 65 years old. And I'm still very disciplined about how my day goes, how my weeks go, whether they're super busy or they're a little bit quiet. I still get up at 5:15 in the morning. And I'm not working out at that time, but I am doing some things.
Okay. Well, I'd like to talk about your routine a bit later. So let's start going into, that's morphed into you becoming a health coach and working in that area. So the physical has been part of your life. So how long have you been in this business of health coaching?
So I would say since right around 2010, specifically doing health coaching. That's always been a part also of the physicality. We owned also a Pilates studio. And anytime you're in the fitness business, you're at the same time also doing some type of health coaching. It might be less formal than that, but people are always wanting to know your opinion about what do you think about these foods? What's your opinion on, this strategy when it comes to whether it's even talking about the sauna and the cold plunge, the various, things that come across your desk from any health and wellness, as well as what do you do for stress? right? That's a hot button topic. So you're coaching at the same time, especially when you work one-on-one with individuals, because as you know, health is not just one piece. Exercise, yes, is a component. And I would even segment exercise. There's your structured exercise and there is how much you break up your sitting time. I think those two buckets, as we age, need equal importance. But then there's the nutrition, again, the sleep. How are you managing your stress? All those pieces. And that you sort of by osmosis are working on when you're coaching someone one-on-one.
Wow. So what does it entail being a health coach?
Great question. So I think that also just a little bit how health coaching has really kind of come to the forefront. I also worked as a worksite wellness consultant, helping companies develop their employee health programs. That's a little bit more on a broader scale, but I think the real reason health coaching has come to the forefront is that our medical system is failing many people. And we have kind of stepped in to fill the gap. You know, there's been within the medical system what we call disease management, right? You've had people helping you manage your disease. That is more and more emphasis has come to the forefront about that. It would be much better to prevent or help people stay healthy than wait till they get sick and manage their disease. And the health coaching has come into the forefront. This fact that we just have a lot of people that need more help. And obviously the medical system is not really doing that in a very strong way. Let's say it that way. And I saw that through my executive coaching. I saw that as a Pilates studio owner through the worksite wellness initiatives that I was doing, that people need more help and they need to be able to see the full picture. It's all those components that we've kind of already mentioned, talking about nutrition, stress, sleep, right? Your exercise component. Are you even spending time in nature and getting good, sunlight? All those kind of things. And I saw a need to kind of want to be able to help that with that whole picture. And that was kind of my desire to go more into the health coaching to see there's also a big need for it. I don't know how it is in Australia, but certainly in the United States, we're one of the sickest nations at the moment. We have only 12% of our population, of our adult population, is metabolically fit. That is a shocking actual number. And we could talk about metabolic health if you want. And just figures like that sort of say, okay, how can we help people and how can we help them before they get sick? And that was my sort of passion of wanting to go deeper into the health coaching field.
Okay. Let's talk about metabolic health and what that means, because I think people are starting to hear about it, unless they've got an idea what it is. So is this specifically for women or for men? And I would probably prefer us to talk about women because I think the blokes have plenty of what I call them bros out there talking about men's health, but I don't hear a lot about, practical stuff for the women. And obviously my interest here is because I work with professional women who want to be self-employed or who are self-employed, is keeping their ability to think and work and produce quality work. And part of that is looking after their body and obviously their brain. So let's talk about metabolic health.
Absolutely. And then I'd love to come back to that one point that about women is I think many of the women, unfortunately, particularly any of the women over 40, have spent a lot of their time taking care of other people, whether that be children or a partner, or now we see many women having to take care of their parents. They have relinquished taking care of themselves. And it's not a judgment. There is no guilt about that. It's just the way life came. And one of my things I hope to inspire people is, and I use this a lot in my health coaching field, is to say, when you're in the airplane and things go wrong, what do they ask you to do? They ask you to put your oxygen mask on first so that you can not only take care of yourself, but you're able to help others. You cannot help others if you don't breathe. So that was just a little side point I want to make. And I think it's really hope that women can feel inspired to say, you know what? It's okay for me to prioritize my health, and I shouldn't feel guilty about it. And I just should feel good and start to build confidence in that way. And I think a key to that confidence piece is understanding metabolic health. Because again, I think women and certainly in the dance world, it's all about your weight or your scale or, a lot of things about your size. And metabolic health just opens up a whole other spectrum of what it means to have your metabolic processes functioning optimally. There are 5 markers, and depending on which organization you adhere to, some say if you have 2 or more of these in the suboptimal direction or 3 or more, that doesn't really matter. But those markers are waist circumference, blood pressure, blood glucose, fasting glucose, and 2 from the cholesterol panel, the triglycerides and the HDL. And again, you notice there's nothing in there about weight. There's nothing in there about BMI. There's nothing in there about total cholesterol. These are 5 markers that are very indicated of really a bigger picture of where do you sit on the blood sugar insulin spectrum, meaning are you insulin sensitive or are you going in the direction of insulin resistance? A big piece that's very simple for many women to track is the waist circumference, right? You just need a tape measure. And I see this really beneficial to help people also be able to distance themselves a little bit from the scale, because scale is not necessarily the only piece of evidence to show you that you're healthy. And it's maybe even a poor metric at best. However, waist circumference does give you an indication of how are you doing when it comes to visceral fat. And we know that visceral fat, or that fat around our organs, is the most deleterious to our health as we are aging. And being able to sort of say, hey, look, my pants are starting to feel a little bit looser, and understanding that you're really making strides forward in improving your metabolic health. And we know, talk to any health coach, very many men are much quicker to see the scale move. Women, it moves much slower. And again, I'm generalizing, but it's what we see in our practices. And you can pretty much ask any health coach that's what we see. And we really want to start from helping to build confidence, understand they're improving their health, even if that scale doesn't move right away.
Yes, I think that's a critical thing. And I did, as I mentioned earlier to you, that I had worked with men in the past, many, many, many years ago, with it used to be a program called Gut Busters in Australia. And yeah, some of those guys could lose their waist. Their waist measurement would come down in 6 weeks. But women, it could take, and this is the scary bit, it can take a year or more. So let's talk a little bit about insulin. What do we mean by insulin resistance?
So basically insulin resistance and obviously I'm not a chemist or an endocrinologist or anything like that, but insulin is really like the key to your cells. It's sort of I like to call it the bouncer to deciding whether glucose is going to go in or not allowed in, much like you would if you go to the disco. All right. Is the bouncer going to let you in or out? And insulin resistance basically means that the blood glucose is not able to get in the cell. It's like locked. It's shut. And once you're moving towards the latter stages of insulin resistance, you're basically becoming diabetic, right? There's all stages of insulin resistance, whether this is actually accurate, but some say it takes maybe 10 years to become really diabetic, that you go through these various stages of insulin resistances in some parts, but not all the body, and then till eventually you're full-blown diabetic. So obviously you would want to be sensitive, much like we want people to be sensitive and not resistant. And that's an important piece to understand. And it was a great question because many in the medical system focus only on blood glucose, right? We have, fasting glucose tests. We do, which is just a 24-hour snapshot looking at your blood glucose. We have the hemoglobin A1C test, or as we call in America, HbA1c, which is actually a very good test. At least it's showing you more of a 3-month average of how your blood glucose is doing. And I recommend to many people to do that. But we don't talk enough about insulin. And I think the ultimate person that I have learned a whole lot, not only from his podcast, but his book, is Benjamin Bickman, who works out of Brigham Young in Utah and wrote a beautiful book called Why We Get Sick and What We Can Do About It. And he goes really into the details of the relationship between our health and chronic conditions and blood sugar and insulin. And I think if anyone who works with me, at least they have a really good picture of what's going on there. And I think part of what a health coach does is we try to help educate people, empower people to be able to make good decisions for themselves.
Yes. Now that's an interesting point you made there too, that it can actually creep up over a number of years. And I think that's, especially for mature women, if you're 50 years old or you're 60 years old and you are not feeling well or fuzzy-headed or you're not happy with the way you're progressing, you may have an accumulation of, issues that need to be found and need to be dealt with. Is it too late if you're 60 years old and you're not healthy that you can do something about it?
I think you can turn things around at any age. Obviously, if you have a very serious medical condition, that we're talking about is a whole other story. That is something to be worked on with a medical professional. And again, we make a real distinction in coaching is we educate, we empower, we give you the tools. We do not prescribe, treat, or professionally give you medical advice. We are coaching and supporting you to make the best decisions for you. That said, when it comes to much of our health, we can make changes at any stage. I have worked with individuals who've had HbA1cs, again, that hemoglobin A1c, that blood sugar test that shows you your 3-month average in the 9, the diabetic range, and they have lowered it, right? And it all depends on how much time are you willing to put in, how patient will you be, and how willing are you? We call this in the coaching world readiness to change. Because if you're not wanting to change and you're not willing to experiment with some other ideas, it's not going to happen. And that goes back to the mental piece that you were talking about. And it can be very hard to change, especially as we mature. We've done these things the same. Maybe our parents did them the same. And we just continue feeling that that's the way we're going to hang on to. However, I've seen amazing changes from many people. And I want to say, I'd focus a lot on the older people above 40, 50, 60, and above. I work with some 70-plus-year-olds, and I've seen change on a dramatic scale with them as well.
All right. Well, let's think about a typical person who comes to you for health coaching. Where do you start? And what are say, for example, if they're very, very wise and they know it's going to be a 2 or 3 year, do you get clients who will stick with you for a couple of years? Do they stay that long?
Well, yes, in different ways, right? In different ways. So let's say first and foremost, what happens from the coaching standpoint is a little bit of what I just described in there is that the individual needs to understand that this is not medical advice, that we work from a position of what does the individual want to work on? And in a way that it's very empowering also for me because people are at a place where they would like to have a partner in change. I think of the coach as being we're your support partner. We're your accountability partner. We're helping you sort of open your eyes to seeing and hearing other information. We're helping you work through what it is that you would really like to take to a newer level in that way. So generally someone will come with something that they would like to improve on. Yeah, that can be nutrition. Obviously, I'm a low carb ketogenic nutrition coach. That's my focus. That's where I've seen the best results. I recently did Dr. Georgia Eads' mental health and ketogenic nutrition course. So I see also improvements in brain health. I've had individuals come to say, I'm feeling brain fog. I'm feeling tired. I don't necessarily have much weight that I want to lose, but I would like to just have more energy, feel better in that way. There are individuals I've worked with who, they've got little bits of information, but they can't seem to put it all together, right? Figuring out what type of exercise might be the best for them. How can they structure that in their busy life with travel and different things? So individuals come generally with very different goals. Obviously, the women have different goals than the men. Some are similar. But I think what the coach really does is we help them figure out that it's not just one thing, right? In fact, sometimes it turns around. I've had people come to me really for nutrition advice, but then what we see is what is the biggest component that's interfering with their being successful is stress and sleep. And then we adjust, and that's what you do in coaching. You always work with that present moment where they are and say, okay, let's talk about sleep hygiene. What are we doing in terms of our devices? Are we getting regular sleep? Are we getting any natural sunlight? Andrew Huberman has some.
Yes, it's incredible when you think about it. So let's go on to, I don't like the word diet because when we talk about the word diet, people think, I've got to restrict my food. I think we really mean nutrition. So let's talk a little bit about this because you hear people say, well, I've got to go on a diet. But what I think we mean is you need to look at the nutrition that you're eating. So there's vegetarianism, there's veganism, there's the keto diet, there's high protein, low fat diets, Mediterranean diets. You have a particular one that you prefer. Could you talk about the keto diet? Because we know the brain actually likes ketones, and that could actually help with the professional women that I'd like to work with. They want to keep their cognitive abilities as sharp as they can. So let's talk about that.
Absolutely. And I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think diet is a scary thought for many women. And again, not that I don't work with men, but I think diet has been something that for decades women have struggled with. So lifestyle, nutrition. I like to say when we talk about nutrition these days, think of your nutrition as fueling yourself for performance. It's not about a punishment. It's not about a reward. It's about what's going to give you maximum performance. I think it's Ted Nyman who said, start eating now the way you'd like to the rest of your life. And I sincerely believe that that is true. Trying to figure out what really sustains you. And particularly from a nutrition standpoint. And again, I've seen this again and again with the women I work with, is they've been hungry all the time, pretty much. They've been starving themselves. They've been counting calories. They've been on diets. And while they even might be overweight or underfueled, in many ways, their cells are starving because they've had so little nutrition. So that was a little sidestep. But where I stand today as a 65-year-old, soon to be next month 66, is I've changed, right? Just have to look at my blog or anything that I post. 20 years of vegetarian. And I didn't go into the vegetarian route from a philosophy. I first went into it. I thought it was sort of perceived as a healthy diet. And in some ways, in the beginning, any time you switch up your diet, you're going to see some good changes. And then a lot of other people were doing it around me, and it seemed to work until it didn't, was towards the end of my dance career. And who knows, maybe this very strict dance career, the fact that I was experiencing hormonal changes, it just failed. And it took me about 2 years. It took someone else being kind of asking me the critical question, like, have you ever thought about your diet as being your joint problem, right? I was having severe joint issues, swelling, problems doing sort of simple things. So it caused me to wake up and say, hey, diet is really powerful here, or nutrition, however we want to call it. Until then, I had kind of just sort of thought it was just something that you made to kind of keep you moving. I didn't really make that relationship to longevity, well-being, right? Obviously, we think more about that as we age, right? I was in my 40s, mid 40s, and, you just start sort of seeing different things coming across yourselves in your own body. And that's subsequently my own personal experience made me want to do a deep dive in, like, what are all these choices? What is really the benefits of vegan, vegetarian? And then the work of Gary Taubes was really sort of the game changer in seeing that it doesn't have to just be about weight, but when you've got a high consumption of carbohydrates and sugar, you're going to have some fat storage issues. And many of us women who experience premenopause, menopause, postmenopause, we're having all kinds of hormonal changes. And if we're adding to that with a high carbohydrate and sugar consumption, for me, it was a game changer to see this is not really a sustainable path. My first foray was more into just going low carbohydrate. Definitely low sugar comes along with that because body sees them at both the same. And then you start adding things in, right? The fish, the animal products. And then fast forward to these last few years, I've just seen from a cognitive capability, from a muscle maintenance capability, that having more meat, more protein, and we can talk about protein specifically if you want to a little bit. I function better. I see my clients function better, both from a cognitive as well as a physical standpoint. And I think that's what the research is also showing us, is that we have for too long, particularly females, eaten too little protein. And I find the best way to get good protein is to consume animal products, whether that be fish or the four-legged ones. And I also see better results with people who do that.
Well, let's talk about how much protein we actually need, more so for women than men. I think, as I said, I think most men have been covered by heaps and heaps of gym guys out there. How much protein do women need?
There are sort of mixed opinions, but all kind of coming to the range. I would say, first and foremost, anything above the recommended daily allowance, which is really the bare minimum of protein. And I saw recently, not recently, a few years ago, even Kaiser Permanente, which is a healthcare company in the United States, pretty conservative, said, maybe even doubling the recommended daily allowance would be good for older adults. But we kind of go from out that area of 1.5 grams of protein to 2 grams of protein. Some people say per kilogram of lean body mass, right? Yeah, you want to have kilograms to grams. And that way, some people will say you could even use that per pound of body weight. But I think that 1.5 to 2 grams of protein, right, is a pretty good range. If someone is not very active, they probably should go to the lower end, right, of that. Someone who's super active, maybe even professional athlete is doing more than that, or someone who's also, sort of trying to recover post-surgery, or they've had some deficits to supplement with. But I think that range offers a good perspective. Now, there's some interesting work from Don Layman, PhD, who's been researching muscle protein synthesis. He works with a woman named Gabrielle Leon, and they have some good research to say that there's about a 30 gram of protein per meal threshold, that we need to hit that 30 grams in order to sort of stimulate what's called muscle protein synthesis. Again, I see that beneficial. I try to achieve that, particularly in the first 2 meals of the day. It seems that the earlier, we call that in the coaching world, front loading, not waiting till the dinner time to try to get all your protein. As we age, we're a little less efficient at processing protein. But I say for many women, that's a great starting point. If you even, try to strive for that 30 grams per meal at breakfast and lunch. And that for many women is going to be a huge jump, right? One thing I mentioned to you that lovely, I miss her a lot. She was a brilliant mind in the low carbohydrate community. Her name was Adele Height. She was a registered dietitian, all kinds of other degrees after her name. And she said, many women think if they eat 2 eggs, they're just eating gobs of food. And she said, I would probably say you need at least 4 eggs, right? Knowing that 1 egg is only 6 grams of protein, right? At 4, you just got 24. Encourage women to just take their time, be patient. Just try to increase it. Anything a little bit above what you're doing right now is probably a good thing.
Yes. Isn't that incredible that, 2 eggs is just 12 grams of protein, and we're talking about having 30 grams 3 times a day. Depends on your weight. So if you're maybe a 50 or 60 kilogram person, so a 50 kilogram woman, and so 1.5 grams is 75 grams a day. And I guess the other issue that I know about is that as we age, we're losing a lot of muscle from about the age of 40. And that's a concern too. So you've got to keep packing the protein in to hopefully stop losing it. And then also, because as we age, our protein metabolism is deteriorating. So you've got to have more. So what should they be eating?
Well, absolutely. Great question. So just as a side note, there's only 2 ways to build muscle, right? And that's with the exercise and with nutrition, right? So if you're skimping and cutting short on your nutrition, meaning your protein, you're missing out on one of those levers. And I know Peter Attia talks about that. You're not really pulling on that nutrition lever. You're only, maybe relying on your exercise lever. And we can talk about that. I definitely am a huge proponent of strength training for women, particularly, right? And that doesn't mean you're going to bulk up. It just means you're going to help to maintain some muscle mass. But yet, how to get, let's say, even 30 grams of protein per meal. So, for instance, a breakfast, you could definitely go that eggs, right? But again, you're going to have to go maybe for 4 eggs, right? And a piece of meat. Or if you don't want that many eggs, let's say you do 3 eggs, right? So you've got 18 grams of protein there. You're going to need maybe a little piece of leftover meat from the last day. Maybe, some people enjoy some bacon, although bacon doesn't have a whole lot of protein. Or maybe you have a little bit of yogurt with it, right? Some good old Greek yogurt that has a pretty good high protein quantity. For myself, my usual breakfast is Greek yogurt. I'll put a scoop of collagen peptides on it because that gets an extra 10 grams of protein on it. Throw a few walnuts and maybe a little bit of full fat or cream on it. And, I've got my 30 there. And that's pretty standard, especially during the work week. Do much more of the scrambled eggs on the weekend. And I'll have 4 or 5 and some other little piece of meat maybe with it. For many women, I think lunch is where they struggle. I work 40 to 50 hours a week. My husband is Dutch and he makes these great Dutch meatballs. Can generally kind of get me in that. It's definitely over 30 grams of protein. So some leftover meat, maybe a boiled egg on the side, or we do these things that are, we call them egg casseroles. Looks like maybe a quiche, but without the bread. It's just eggs and sausage and whatever we've got in our fridge to throw in that. If I'm really in a pinch, I'll use some of the meat sticks that are out there. There's a couple good brands of those. Or in Australia, do you do the biltong? Do you do like the South African?
I think it's more popular with men than women.
Yeah.
But yes, it's something that they need to have a look at.
For my executive women, I really try to encourage it because they travel a lot. They're good quality meat sticks these days. They even have Wagyu and grass-fed and every imaginable. We've gone way beyond beef jerky. We have much better things these days. But most of those have like 9 or 10 grams of protein with it. The evening meal is the easy one. That one, most people don't have a problem with. That is if you're eating animal products. One of the reasons I moved away from if you're a vegetarian and you're trying to get, good solid protein, that's a whole other conversation about bioavailability, plant products and animal products. It's much harder if you're in that way to get that. But, if you're eating animal products, fish products, whether you're having shrimp or, steak, lamb, beef, it's very easy in the evening meal to find that. And that's one of the things I find. I call myself more meat centric these days. In order to get that protein, I rely heavily on animal products.
And the other thing about keto diets, aren't they high fat as well? Or is that not so important anymore?
Absolutely. So for many people, they might not even understand that the ketogenic diet has its origins or popularity as a treatment for epilepsy, right? Originally, the ketogenic diet was prescribed for individuals who were having seizures. And they found that a very high fat content. And in fact, some of the more, and this was really only done in a clinical setting, could be as much as 90% of your nutritional consumption being fat. Our brain seems to really like fat, and it likes ketones, right? And fat, if we go back to the blood sugar piece, right? So there's 3 macronutrients: carbohydrates, protein, and fat. Carbohydrates are non-essential, meaning if we don't eat them, we won't die. However, if we don't have protein and fat, we will, right? Carbohydrates are really only as a fuel source, but fat is very minimal effect. Some say no effect on the blood sugar insulin component. Thus, it seems that our brain operates pretty well in that. There are divisions within the ketogenic diet. You have the extreme, what I told you about 90% ketogenic diet. You have, I believe it's called the classical, which is more in that 75% fat, I believe in. Don't quote me on these percentages, and then you had the modified Atkins, which was a little bit lower on that. And then we have what we're kind of considering calling ketogenic diet now. And that would be really where your carbohydrate consumption is probably in that range of 20 to 30 carbohydrates per day total. Many people, I'm doing keto or I'm doing that, and they're consuming like 100 grams or 200 grams of carbohydrates. I'm like, no, not really. Right. And there are many people who will say, well, it's not really ketogenic unless you're seeing ketones being produced in the body. How do you see that? You have to measure them. Whether you're doing that via stick, like Keto Mojo, or you have also the ability to see that in your urine, although there's some discrepancy about that. Is that just the excess that you're getting rid of? But you also have it by judging through your breath, right, of the ketogenics monitor. So there are those spectrums of, are you really having ketones being produced in the body? And for many people, they may not even understand. You have 2 kind of fuel sources. You can either be using glucose or ketones as a fuel source. And what we're kind of using as a little bit of lingo in whether you're in the low carbohydrate world, the ketogenic, is something we call fat adapted. And that's what I hope my clients become. And that means you can use either one of those fuel sources. You can use blood sugar, and you can use fat, and you can move easily back and forth. And I think the key to that is, how do you know if you can move back and forth? I would say very simple, that you can go from meal to meal and not be stressing about being hungry. And I think that's one of the biggest benefits from whether you call it low carbohydrate, whether you call it ketogenic, or just you're minimizing your sugar and carbohydrate consumption. You're not hungry all the time because you're what we call fat adapted. Your body can sometimes use fuel on your own body as a fuel source. And maybe that's something we don't talk about enough. Let's not make people be hungry all the time.
That's the secret. Don't feel hungry. So yeah, carbohydrates can make you feel hungry within half an hour, plus brain fog. Let's get into strength training now. I think a lot of women are concerned that they're going to get muscular, but as we get older, I can tell you now, I've been trying to do strength training for 5 years. I can just maintain. I can't grow muscle at my age. I'm 67. I'm maintaining muscle, but it's a struggle. And I work out 6 days a week and I walk. But gee, at my age and being male, it is difficult to grow bigger muscles, not like the young ones. So women obviously concerned if they're 50 or 60 years old, they're going to end up muscle bound. Let's talk about strength training for women and the benefits.
We know as we age, we just by the pure fact that we're gaining years on that number, we're going to lose some muscle mass. And I think back to those two levers, it's strength training plus your nutrition combined that can have the greatest benefits. I only started doing real serious strength training at the age of 60, so almost 6 years ago. I had always done Pilates. I'd done a lot of yoga. I've done, I hiked, I swam, I walked, or I did a lot of different movement modalities. I danced, obviously. But serious strength training, I think, is a necessity for those of us 50 and above. And many, I think, younger people should start doing it as well. And because of what you just said, if we don't, we're going to lose it. It is that use it or lose it. And that needs to be, and I think where women fear about the whole bulking up, if you're doing it sensibly, whether you're increasing your workouts or you're wanting to up your weight a little bit, you can modify strength training to make it fit exactly how you want to. Just because you start to do strength training doesn't mean automatically you're going to be able to compete in the CrossFit Games next year. There is that extreme if that's something that you aspire to do. However, I think there's a minimum you need to do just to maintain. You can do, low weights with more repetitions. You can do just strength training, just your own body weight where you're not even using additional weight on that. There's even a piece of home equipment these days called the X3, which uses what he calls variable training, right? It's a great form of home resistance training in that way. Pilates is great for muscle maintenance. I think where it misses, unless you're doing it really intensely and vigorously, is it doesn't increase the weight. Therefore, it can be hard to kind of keep ahead of the muscle loss game. You might just be, still a little bit in the deficit in that way. And I think it requires, though, especially for a lot of those of us older women, you need a good trainer or you need to do some good serious studying yourself or learning good technique. I think it's great to do things like Pilates before you do strength training because you've got good posture, you've got good body mechanics, you are aware of what you can and cannot do. You cannot go from 0 to 100, but I think doing that at least a couple times a week should be part of your routine as sort of I call it the aging investment plan.
Definitely an investment. No, it's taken me nearly 5 years. I did body weight training for about 3 years. And then I got the X3, like you mentioned, which you can do 6 days a week. But again, posture is everything. So yeah, good training. And that's very, very important. But that's the best thing that's ever happened to me, along with walking as well. But for women, I think it's a bit tougher using the X3 because the bands, they have to modify the bands a bit. So probably nobody knows what we're talking about. But yeah, they need to get some help. Would you suggest maybe going to a gym to start with or engaging a personal trainer?
If it's in your financial capabilities, I think it's always great to start with an experienced trainer, especially if you're new to it. I think for many women, the gym is intimidating, that they go in and not quite sure what to do. Or if they've had any injuries in the past, that they're a bit fearful of it. And, you can eventually maybe move on to your own type of training. I think that's a great way if that's in your budget. I think it first and foremost is to start to, watch some videos and look at different people. There's so much information out there. I know it can be overwhelming that's also an addition, just like you would if you were trying to figure out what's your nutritional path, is do your own little bit investigation on that. Then also trying to say, well, maybe there's some little pieces of this that I learned from somebody else that I can start to practice and try to improve on my own. All right. We have a small little place that we can work out here also in our house. We also work out at a gym facility. So I think it's flexibility. And also for women, figuring out small routines, especially if you work with any corporate women or people who are in, is what can you do in 25 or 30 minutes that you don't have to go to the gym and spend 2 hours getting yourself some routines that you can do, in different sort of time frames in that. And not forgetting though, that nutrition piece is equally important. If you're not getting enough protein and still you're really doing all you can on the strength training, you're missing out on a huge component of being able to maintain that muscle mass. And I think the other piece that I see with not only just feeling that your muscles are at a better quality is confidence, right? And for whether you're an entrepreneur or whether you're just running your household, anything that helps you build confidence, that can be, just learning a new type of movement modality, right? That is a win when it comes to your health.
Fantastic. Well, at this point, is there anything else we need to point out to women to how to look after themselves? Because what we're really talking about here is when you're 80 years old, you've got to be able to get out of the chair and walk across the room. You've got to be able to do your shopping. You've got to be able to carry your shopping. I mean, you might think now, or you might want to go on a holiday and climb up hills, but you've got to start now because otherwise we are deteriorating as adults. So what else do we need to consider? And then I want to talk about, how people can get in contact with you and get your advice as a health coach. So is there anything we haven't covered? We should.
I think that in terms of the aging piece is a little bit back to what we said about prioritizing your health and not feeling guilty about it. That we encourage people to get their finances in order, to do all of that, about making sure that you've got, things in order, whether you have kids or you don't have. But we haven't encouraged them enough to say on a daily, weekly basis, spending time investing in my health is part of that investment plan. And it does need some changes. Certainly what I'm focusing and spending time on now at 65 is not what I was doing when I was 45. And I think focusing on trying to stay strong mentally and physically is a key component to trying to age with a little bit of vibrancy. I think it's also important to give people that space and open the door that it's okay to reinvent ourselves, right? Whether we feel we need to go take some lessons at the gym to understand how to maintain some of our muscles, or we need to strengthen our mental capacity, sign up for a language, right? Take a language course. If we're needing to improve our nutritional sources, we need to maybe seek out a health coach, or to think that it's okay to reach out to people. Everybody knows their doctor and their dentist. I would like to say there's 3 other fingers on the hand. Who else is on your team? Maybe you need, like your entrepreneurs you would, maybe they need an executive coach. Maybe they need a health coach, a therapist, body worker. Seek out other people who can make your aging process feel like you've got a team. Get your team together. And I think sometimes that requires just going back and sort of put yourself in a but calculated risk position. Take some chances.
That's brilliant. Okay, so let's talk about how they could contact you. I'd highly recommend that they did if they were looking for a health coach. I've been following you I have been following you on Twitter and I did read some of your articles. So
thank you.
I think you have a lot to offer. And I think this podcast has gone very deep. So there's a lot of gems in there. So how do they contact you?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the honor, the privilege to spend some time with you. And I so wholeheartedly appreciate the work you're doing for women, whether they're entrepreneurs, they're still working at, it's a much needed service.
Thank you.
Thank you. So you can find me. I'm Square One Wellness everywhere. And what I sort of took that with the idea, try to bring things back to square one. Let's start simple and try to focus on making health a priority. At Twitter, I'm Square One, the number one wellness. On Instagram, exactly the same, Square One Wellness. Website is Square One Wellness. And on LinkedIn, I'm just my name, Krisna Hanks.
Right. So I'll put all these in the show notes so people can click on the links and all that. But that's fabulous. Thank you very much for joining me today.
Absolutely. It's been my honor.
I'm excited to continue providing you with engaging and informative episodes that will help you level up in your entrepreneurial journey. Once again, thank you for tuning into the Wisepreneurs podcast. Stay tuned and I'll catch you in the next one.